What is an ETF? The first ETF was launched in the US in the year 1993. Soon afterward, individual investors and financial investors embraced ETFs. But, what exactly is an ETF? ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. It is a stock and mutual fund rolled into one. In ETF, money from different investors are pulled together to buy diversified stocks and securities. What makes ETF unique is that it can be bought and sold in the market, just like any stock. And did you know that First Metro Asset offers the first exchange-traded fund in the market today? Introducing the First Metro Equity Exchange-Traded Fund. First Metro Equity Exchange-Traded Fund is designed to track the Philippine Stock Exchange Index, or PSEI. PSEI is a fixed basket of 30 common stocks across all sectors, carefully selected to represent the general movement of the stock market. To put simply, when you invest in First Metro Equity Exchange Traded Fund, you are investing in the top 30 Philippine stocks available today, allowing investors a cost-efficient way to ride the index over the long term. Track the performance of PSEI through instant diversification in a transparent, flexible, and simple investment solution.
In order to make our annual shareholders meeting event as successful and smooth flowing as possible, we need your full cooperation and adherence to the following guidelines. This ASM is being recorded. Attendance's video and microphones are disabled by the host during the session to avoid interruptions. Due to logistical limitations of the meeting conducted virtually, open forum or discussion will not be possible during the meeting. However, stockholders may raise any relevant questions limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for guidance, wisdom, and support as we gather once again for the annual stockholders meeting. Help us to engage in a meaningful discussion. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make right decisions, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit for the greater glory of God. May your goodness and love be present amongst us today. Come bless our gathering, our board of directors, our president, the officers, the FAMI family, our partners, and our shareholders with unity, hope, and vision. We ask these things in your most holy name. Amen.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2021 First Metro Asset Management's annual stockholders meeting of Exchange Traded Fund. Present on this event are the Board of Directors of First Metro Philippine Equity Exchange Traded Fund, Inc. And as an additional reminders to our shareholders, shareholders who have completed the pre-registration requirements are qualified to vote. When the poll questions are launched, which will be flashed on your screen, you may cast your vote on the proposed resolutions by clicking your choice from the available options, then click Submit. Results of the preliminary voting will be presented after each poll, and final results will be included in the minutes of the meeting. I'm now turning over the digital floor to Mr. Eduardo Carrion. Sir, you may now unmute and turn on your video. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the year 2021 Annual Stockholders Meeting of First Metro Philippine Equity Exchange Traded Fund. In view of the ongoing pandemic situation and the implementation of the community quarantine, the company is unable to conduct this year's annual stockholders meeting physically. Instead, our meeting shall be via remote communication with the stockholders participating by electronic means, pursuant to the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The meeting will now please come to order. Ms. Secretary, have you sent the notice of this meeting? And is there a quorum for the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notices were duly sent. This is to certify that the notice for the 2021 Annual Stockholders Meeting was published to notify the stockholders of record in the business sections of the Manila Times and the Manila Standard on May 17 and May 18, 2021, in print and online format and in the company's website in accordance with SEC regulations. There are actually present in person or represented by their proxies via remote communication 19,438,596 common shares out of the 19,661,260 common shares outstanding. This constitutes 98.87% of the outstanding capital stock. We therefore have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
There being the required quorum, this meeting is therefore duly constituted for the transaction of business in the agenda. Each item for approval in the agenda will appear in your screen, and stockholders participating can cast their vote by clicking the appropriate box. The votes of the stockholders who sent their duly accomplished forms with votes prior to the meeting will be shown on screen. The additional votes cast online shall be added to the result of preliminary voting. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the stockholders meeting held on September 16, 2020. The matters taken up in the said meeting were emailed to the participating shareholders and also published in our website. Is there any motion from the floor?
Good afternoon. I am Lloyd Laurilia, proxy for Katrina Santos. Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of the minutes.
I am Ingrid Cruz, proxy for Ms. Janice Gamos. I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
We are now opening the voting poll for the approval of the minutes. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman.
May I now request the corporate secretary to present the preliminary voting results.
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results, we have 98.87% who voted in favor. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained, And there being no objections for the approval of the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held on June 19, 2019, said minutes are approved. The next item in the agenda is the annual report to the stockholders. Ms. Karen Liza Roa, FAMI President, will now run the report on operations and financial condition and FMETF's performance.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, shareholders and board members. Allow me to give you a update with regard to the First Metro ETF for the year ending 2020, December 2020. Isa, can you share your slide, please? Okay. Go ahead. All right, so we'll give you a quick executive summary of what the highlights are, and then we will proceed to provide you with the financial highlights, and then how the fund has performed over the last year, and then I will pass you on to our fund manager for a capital market outlook. Next. So for the year 2020, we were able to generate a total subscription, net subscription of 277 million pesos in net subscription. For the first 5 months of the 2021, we've been able to generate already 257.6 million in net subscriptions. Very briefly for the financial highlights, the total assets of the ETF as of December 31, 2020 stood at 1.891 billion, or a 13% increase versus the previous year, 2019, which ended at 1.667 billion. Total liabilities likewise increased from 2.031 million in 2019 to 3.943 million in 2020, giving us a total shareholders equity of 13.3% increase from 2019 of 1.665 billion to its current or end 2020 ending of 1.887 billion. Okay. ROE for the year 2020 was at negative 3.13. If you'll notice that the however, just a notation, the PSEI ended 2020 at 7,139. Net asset value as of December 31 for the FMETF was at 107.5543. Okay. Just a little bit of a notation also there is that for the full year, the NAVPS tracked very closely the index at negative 0.8 versus the index at negative 0.8, 8.6. Next. All right. The ETF, the FM ETF was launched in May of 2014. As a tracker, it mirrored the Philippine Stock Exchange Index very closely, and this is how the historical NAVPS performed since 2014 all the way up to 2021. So for a 16-year period, this is the trend or the historical behavior of the price of the ETF. Very similar to the index levels for the same period. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Would you wish to proceed to? Okay. Back to you, Mr. Carrion.
Mr. Ed Carrion, you may now unmute and turn on your video.
Due to logistical limitations of the meeting conducted virtually, open forum and discussion will not be possible during the meeting. However, a stockholder will be given opportunity to raise any relevant questions or express an appropriate comment limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comments received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. Mr. Edser Trindad will now run the report on market outlook.
Mr. Trinidad, you may now turn on your video and unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the FMPF shareholders and to the board of directors. Let me just share you my screen. Okay, for this afternoon, my presentation will be in three parts. We'll provide you with what happened for at least for the past 5 months, and what is our outlook, and what are the appropriate strategies we're employing, or what do we expect in terms of the risk that can affect our outlook. So the PSEI turned the corner, gaining about 4% in May. This is the first time that the market had experienced a month-to-month increase. However, it is still down on a year-to-date basis, falling to about 4.8% as of June 4. There's basically an improvement in terms of the sentiment of the market, considering there's a slowdown in COVID cases, and as well as the stabilization of inflation, easing concerns not only on the equities market, but as well as the fixed income market. In addition, for the equities market, the first quarter numbers were quite a surprise in general, considering that we had experienced a lockdown during March. But despite of that, corporate earnings seems to be in line with analyst expectations. So considering that for first half, we expect that the equity market will continue to trade on a tight range, considering that it has considerably had a gain during the past couple of weeks. Therefore, investors are looking for new catalysts to drive the market. However, for second half, we expect that the recovery will continue due to the higher government spending that will happen by second half because of the run-up to the 2022 national elections. Vaccine rollout will continue to gain momentum, and the increase in vaccination rate may lead to further reopening of the economy. Due to this, investors are now positioning for a 2022 recovery plays. So this chart shows you the PSEI, rather the inflows of foreign investments. As you can see here on this chart, on the year-to-date basis, it remains to be on a net outflow. However, as you can see here, during the beginning of May 26, there has been an uptick in terms of foreign buying. And considering that in terms of foreign ownership on Philippine companies, we're now at a decade low. On average, foreign investors own an average about 22% on Philippine-listed companies. Due to this low exposure, any inflows coming from foreign investors will create a positive impact to the market. And as such, we've seen a big jump in terms of the PSEI's performance due to the inflows that happened beginning of May 25 and 26. However, if you are going to look at the performance in the relative basis, the country is still behind most of the other markets. And as you can see here on this chart from this list, Philippines is basically lagging with the rest of its neighbors. However, we expect that the improvement in terms of sentiment will continue. As you can see here, this is a data that is closely being monitored, not only here in domestic market, but as well as foreign investors. And as you can see here, COVID cases have been slowing down, and this has brought a lot of improved sentiment. Due to this, the government can now ease restrictions that can allow us to start the recovery of the economy. In addition, the investors that have exposure in other countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand have also started to take profits on those markets because those countries have also experienced a surge in terms of their COVID cases. And as you can see here on the chart, both Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand have experienced a surge in terms of their cases. And as a result, this has also led to some sell down on their respective markets, and there has been some shift to the Philippines. I think another thing that can also improve the sentiment is inflation has started to stabilize. Although we expect that inflation for the rest of the year may remain elevated, however, I think we expect that it will continue to be under control, considering that the government has been able to solve some of the problems that we had experienced during the early part of the year. In addition, in terms of the concerns of higher interest rates, it also had given some level of comfort, considering that the BSP has indicated that they are still going to maintain an accommodative stance. And I think for second half, a vaccine will continue to gain traction in terms of the arrivals. As you can see here on the chart, most of the most of the vaccines that we have contracted to acquire will arrive by second half. In fact, about 80% of its population has already the government has already provided for the vaccines, and that will allow us to further reopen the economy as long as this new or this arrival of vaccines will come into play. And this chart shows you the arrivals of vaccines, and this is the cumulative number of vaccines that have arrived or that will arrive in our country. And as you can see here, bulk of the vaccines will start arriving by latter part of this year. So this basically which drives a lot of improved sentiment in our market. And as such, a lot of analysts have already adjusted their earnings projection upwards. And as you can see here on the chart, as compared to our previous survey, earnings growth were adjusted upwards 2021 from 38.9 to 39.5. What is quite significant is for 2022 growth from 20.7, it's now adjusted upwards to about 23 or 22.9%. And for GDP, while GDP forecast for 2021 was downgraded from 7% to 5.5 because of the unexpected lockdown in Metro Manila for 2022, analysts have adjusted their GDP growth to about 7% as compared to our previous survey of about 6.2. However, for the rest of the macro outlook, they are looking at a pretty stable macro outlook as compared to our previous survey. So, nevertheless, we believe that in general, we expect that the second half will significantly be a bit better prospect for the equities market, as I stated a while back. However, there are certain risks to our outlook. First of all, as a resurgence in COVID cases should basically the main concern, cause for concern, as if there will be another surge in COVID cases, then we may be forced to enact new or restrictive quarantine measures. Thus, the expectations of an economic recovery may be in jeopardy. The spike in inflation due to rise in fuel and or commodity prices is also another thing that we're looking closely at, considering that other countries have started in terms of recovery, have been faster. Therefore, the demand for crude oil will increase. Thus, there might be some cost or a pushback or a pull up in terms of our inflation rate. And there's also, a potential for some above average damages due to calamities. And if you may recall, last year there was an expected volcanic eruption in Taal volcano, and that has also affected the first quarter's GDP numbers. And hopefully, any of these calamities may not be as damaging as what we had seen last year. And lastly, considering that we're basically near an election period, we expect that there should be some higher political noises that will happen and that can also dampen investors' enthusiasm on the Philippine market. That ends my presentation.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Trinidad. We now move to the next item in the agenda, which is the ratification of all acts and resolutions of the Board of Directors and Management and all committees for the fiscal year 2020 of FMETF, including the following: renewal of the Management Distribution Agreement with FAMI. Is there any motion from the floor?
I am Melvin Abahon, representing First Metro Securities. Mr. Chairman, I move that all acts, transactions, and resolutions of the Board of Directors and Management and all committees for the fiscal year 2020 of FMETF, including the renewal of the Management Distribution Agreement with FAMI, and the minutes of meeting of the board and board committees be ratified and confirmed.
I am Bel Pajarillo, proxy for Ms. Mary Love Alex. I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
We are now opening the voting poll for the ratification of corporate acts. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman?
May I now request the Corporate Secretary to present the preliminary voting results.
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results, we have 98.87% who voted in favor, none voted against, and there are no abstentions. Thank you.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained to ratify all acts and resolutions of the Board of Directors, Management, and all committees for the fiscal year 2020, including the renewal of the Management Distribution Agreement and the minutes of meetings of the Board and the committees of FMETF, the motion is carried. Next in the agenda is the election of the members of the Board of Directors of FMETF to serve for the year 2021 to 2022. Mr. Eduardo Menjola, Chairman of the Nomination Committee, will now explain the nomination procedure under current SEC rules.
Mr. Chairman, in compliance with the requirements of the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the First Metro Exchange Traded Fund Manual on Corporate Governance, the Nomination Committee was tasked with the review and evaluation of the qualifications of all persons nominated to the board. Pursuant to this mandate, the Nomination Committee reviewed the qualifications of the following nominees to the Board of Directors and certifies that based on the records, they have all the qualifications and none of the disqualifications prescribed by law and regulations. The list of nominees of First Metro Exchange Traded Fund is contained in the definitive information statement sent to all stockholders and submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission prior to today's meeting. The nominees for the First Metro Philippine Exchange Traded Fund Incorporated are as follows: Mr. Eduardo R. Carrion, Mr. Eduardo S. Mendiola, Mr. Winston Andrew L. Pexon, Mr. Michael G. Sai, Attorney Abelardo V. Cortez, Dr. Bernardo M. Villegas, Father Rafael K. Eloriaga. Attorney Abelardo Cortez, Dr. Villegas, and Father Eloriaga are nominees for independent directors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Menjola. Is there any motion from the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the nominees enumerated by the Nomination Committee Chairman be declared elected to the Board of Directors of the FMETF.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
We are now opening the voting poll for the election of directors. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the Corporate Secretary to present the preliminary voting results.
Sir, based on the preliminary voting results, we have 98.87% who voted in favor of all the nominees. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Let it be on record that upon nominations duly made and there being no other nominations, the following stockholders were unanimously elected to serve on the board: Mr. Eduardo Carrion, Mr. Eduardo Menjola, Mr. Winston Andrew Pexon, Mr. Michael Sai, Attorney Abelardo Cortez, Dr. Bernardo Villegas, and Father Rafael Eloriaga. We are very grateful to our incumbent directors for their continuing invaluable service to the board. Finally, on behalf of the board, may I express gratitude to our valued stockholders for your steadfast loyalty over the years and for your faith and confidence in the company. While unusual times are upon us, we shall, with your support, face the challenges with hope, anchored in divine providence, and with faith in the company's long-standing values of dedication and hard work that has seen the institution through many challenges in its existence. It is our honor and privilege to serve you and the esteemed institution. The next item in the agenda is the appointment of an independent external auditor for the fiscal year 2021. The Audit Committee, in its meeting held on June 10, 2021, had approved the appointment of SGV Company. We now submit this for your ratification. Is there any motion from the floor?
I'm Ruth Chaneco, proxy for Ms. Abigail Magbayo. Mr. Chairman, I move that the appointment of Sisip Gores Velayo and Company as independent external auditor of FMETF be ratified.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
We are now opening the voting polls for the appointment of the external auditor. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the Corporate Secretary to present the preliminary voting results.
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results, again, we have 98.87% who voted in favor, none voted against, and there are no abstentions.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained, the appointment of SGV and Company as independent external auditor of FMETF for the fiscal year 2021 is hereby ratified. Are there any other matters to be taken up?
Mr. Chairman, there are no other matters for consideration of the stockholders.
Stockholders may raise any relevant questions or express an appropriate comment limited to the agenda by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. If there are no other matters for approval of the stockholders, we can now adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the meeting of FMETF be adjourned.
I second the motion.
There being no other matters to consider, the year 2021 annual stockholders meeting of FMETF is hereby adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
that ends our discussion for this year's annual stockholders meeting of the FMETF. Again, you may send relevant questions or comments limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Thank you and have a pleasant afternoon.
What is an ETF? The first ETF was launched in the US in the year 1993. Soon afterward, individual investors and financial investors embraced ETFs. But what exactly is an ETF? ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. It is a stock and mutual fund rolled into one. In ETF, money from different investors are pulled together to buy diversified stocks and securities. What makes ETF unique is that it can be bought and sold in the market, just like any stock. And did you know that First Metro Asset offers the first exchange-traded fund in the market today? Introducing the First Metro Equity Exchange-Traded Fund. First Metro Equity Exchange-Traded Fund is designed to track the Philippine Stock Exchange Index or PSEI. PSEI is a fixed basket of 30 common stocks across all sectors, carefully selected to represent the general movement of the stock market. To put simply, when you invest in First Metro Equity Exchange Traded Fund, you are investing in the top 30 Philippine stocks available today, allowing investors a cost-efficient way to ride the index over the long term. Track the performance of PSEI through instant diversification in a transparent, flexible, and simple investment solution.